and today we are going to talk about ER and IR verbs. And first, in order to get started with the conjugation and how to use these verbs, we need to look at some of the verbs themselves. So I have a list of commonly used ER and IR verbs that also appear in your textbook. Let's take a look at the pronunciation of these verbs. Then we're going to go back through, look at the meaning, and also pronounce them again. Practice is key. Okay. Repiten. Aprender. Beber. Comer. Comprender. Correr. Deber. Leer. Abrir. Asistir a. And that a is part of the infinitive technically. That preposition always has to follow this verb. Compartir. Decidir. Describir. Escribir. Recibir. Vivir. Okay. So, aprender means to learn, see? And we can learn to do something as well. If we want to say to learn to do something, we can conjugate aprender, which we're going to learn how to do in just a minute, and then follow it by the preposition a and another infinitive verb, meaning that it's going to end in AR, ER, or IR. See? So I could say, I learn to speak Spanish. Aprendo a hablar español. See? Bien, so you can follow aprender, conjugate it, then put the preposition a, and then follow it with an infinitive verb, ending in AR, ER, or IR. Okay, beber significa to drink. And beber and tomar, the AR verb that you've already learned that can also mean to drink, can most of the time be used interchangeably. So if you say tomar or beber, depending on the context, you're going to know that it means to drink. See? Okay, comer significa to eat. So comer is to eat. Comprender is to understand, and a phrase that you might have heard in popular media is no comprendo, I don't understand. ¿Sí? No comprendo español, pero tú sí comprendes. Okay, correr is to run. Correr is to run. Deber is should or ought to, and this is often, almost all the time, followed by an infinitive verb. So if I want to say I should or I ought to study Spanish, I'm going to conjugate to change deber and then follow it immediately by an infinitive verb, meaning that it ends in AR, ER, or IR. So if I want to say I should study Spanish, I'll say debo estudiar español. ¿Sí? Bien. Leer means to read. See? Abrir is to open. See? Asistir a is to attend. Compartir is to share. Decidir is to decide, and you can also follow that by an infinitive verb. If you say, I decide to study French, you could say, decido estudiar francés. See? So you can also follow that by an infinitive verb. Remember that rule in Spanish that we've talked about previously, anytime you have two verbs right next to each other, the first verb is going to be conjugated and the second one will be infinitive. And that's going to hold true for the rest of your Spanish learning. Okay. Describir is to describe. Escribir is to write. Recibir is to receive. And vivir is to live. See? Bien. Okay, so once we've taken a look at all of these common ER and IR verbs, and now we know the meanings, let's do a quick review on the breakdown of a verb itself. So come with me. All right, so here we have an infinitive verb. This is one of the new verbs that you just learned. It's an IR verb. Remember, we talked about infinitive verbs, and in Spanish, an infinitive verb is the most basic form of a verb. It's the to do something form of the verb: to run, to jump, to dance, to sing. And there are three kinds of infinitive verbs in Spanish: verbs that end in AR, verbs that end in ER, and verbs that end in IR. And we have already taken a look at AR verbs. Today our focus is going to be on ER and IR verbs. So verbs in the infinitive form that end in ER and IR. All right, so let's do a quick review again about the breakdown, the structure of a verb in Spanish. Verbs have two parts, and this is important to understand. Verbs have two parts in Spanish. The first part is the root or the stem, and the root or the stem tells us the meaning, so what the action is. So escribe, this tells us that it's to write. It's the actual meaning, the action of the verb. The second part of a verb in Spanish is the ending, and the ending indicates to us who does the action. Do I do the writing? Are you writing? Are we writing? So the ending in Spanish tells us who is doing the action of the root. See, the action of this verb. Okay, so once we know the parts of a verb, we can start to work to conjugate, to change them. So if I want to say beber, to drink, I don't just go around saying I to drink water. I say I drink water, and that's to conjugate, to change. In order to do that, we need to change who is doing the action, and so we're going to take a look at how to do that. We did see this with AR verbs, and we talked about the rules for conjugating AR verbs in Spanish. Let me grab a marker. So, to conjugate verbs, and let's take a quick review to our AR verbs since we've already worked with those. We'll look at hablar, and again, hablar means to speak. To conjugate a verb, you're going to start by dropping the ending, because again, the ending is telling us who does the action. And right now, with it ending in AR, there's not a person that's assigned to this. It's an infinitive form, meaning that no one is doing the action right now. See? So we're going to drop the AR, and then we're going to add the ending associated with the person who is doing the action. So if I speak, I'm going to drop the AR and add my O. If you speak, I'm going to drop the AR and add as. For él, ella, and usted, a. Nosotros, amos. Vosotros, en España, ais. Ellos, ellas, ustedes, han. So if they are doing the speaking, in this case, I'm going to drop the AR and put an. So my verb would be hablan. They speak, or you all speak if it's ustedes doing the speaking. All right, so that same pattern that we do with the AR verbs, we're going to also follow with the ER and IR verbs. So you are going to start with a verb such as beber, meaning to drink, and you're going to drop the ER, and you're going to replace it with whoever is doing the action. So the exact same principle as the AR verbs that we've seen. The only difference here is that instead of an A, you have an E. So if I want to say I drink, I say bebo. If I want to say you, tú, drinks, I say bebes. Él, ella, usted, bebe. Nosotros bebemos. Vosotros en España bebéis. Don't forget that accent on the E. And ellos, ellas, ustedes. If they or you all are doing the drinking, we're going to put an EN, so it's going to be beben. All right. The same concept is going to be put into place for our IR verbs. So a verb like escribir. again meaning to write. We're going to drop the IR and we're going to replace it with the ending that corresponds to the person doing the action. So if I write, I'm going to put escribo. If you, tú, writes, we'll put escribes. Él, ella, usted escribe. Nosotros or nosotras escribimos. Vosotros and vosotras en España escribís. And ellos, ellas, ustedes escriben. Now, when you take a look and compare the ER and IR endings, you're going to see that they are extremely similar. The only difference here is going to be what I have in this red box for you. The nosotros and the vosotros forms are going to be different. The ER verbs are going to end in EMOS and EIS, and the IR verbs are going to end in IMOS and IS. So that's the difference between the ER and IR endings. Okay, clase, so this was just a quick run-through of ER and IR verbs. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and I will be happy to help you in any way that I can. Gracias. Hasta luego.